The other today, Trump came out and was like, if those hostages aren't returned, I'm gonna unleash hell by January 20th. Yeah, Trump threatens, and Barack Ravid comes out. Trump sends a message to Hamas on the hostages. Everybody's talking about the hostages who are being held so violently, inhumanely, and against the will of the entire world in the Middle East. But it's all talk and no action. Please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, the date I proudly assume office of the President of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East, and for those in charge who perpetrated these atrocities against humanity. Those responsible will be hit harder than anybody has been hit in the long and storied history of the United States of America. Release the hostages now. What are you going to do, man? Do more of a genocide? I guess, yeah. The answer is yes. He's just going to do more genocide. What are you going to do? Nuke Gaza? He's going to accidentally nuke Israel. Of course, Israel, remember, did a ceasefire and then got a little nice little cutout for themselves where they can continue, firing at Lebanese people. And then it only became news when Hezbollah fired back.
Joining us, Hezbollah has launched rockets from Lebanon for the first time since the ceasefire was declared with Israel. The armed group is accusing Israel of flagrant violations. Israel's defense minister has promised a harsh response. Let's go live to Beirut now and speak to Ali Hashim. So, Ali, what more, firstly, do we know about this rocket attack by Hezbollah?
Well, there's a statement, and Hezbollah claimed responsibility for an attack, what it called a initial defensive attack in retaliation to Israeli violation of the ceasefire. And Hezbollah warning that it tried to convey its reservations and complaints to the mediators, but there was no response, and that's why it went towards retaliating initially in a defensive way. And of course, the choice of the place, hitting the Sheba farms, is significant here with respect to the Lebanese government's claims towards the Sheba farms as Lebanese territories, and that the mandate given to Hezbollah to resist and to try liberate them. This is something that has been an issue in Lebanon for years. So from this background, Hezbollah attacked the Sheba farms. And of course, now with Israel launching several attacks in Lebanon. Just now, we heard of an attack in the town of Tallusa to the south, where 2 Lebanese were killed and several were wounded. So, but of course, everyone now is asking, and there are concerns whether this ceasefire is going to hold, and if Israel is going to retaliate harshly, how Hezbollah is going to retaliate, and are we going towards a new tit-for-tat between Hezbollah and Israel after only 5 days of truce or ceasefire?
I mean, it almost sounds like the American side is willing this ceasefire to hold.
Didn't Israel violate it first? Yes. There's never been a moment where Israel hasn't violated it. Israel literally just increased the intensity of the bombing campaign leading up to the final closing hours of the ceasefire, the quote-unquote fake ceasefire. Israel also carved out a side deal with America that allowed it to continue bombing certain parts of Lebanon, which they did continue doing. They fired on journalists. They fired on people that were. They fired on people that they claimed were going into territory that is still inside of Lebanon, mind you, that they hadn't pulled out from. And yeah, Israel has violated the ceasefire 100 times, by the way, since the ceasefire.
Though, Dana, that there have been continuous violations since this ceasefire took effect early Wednesday morning. CNN spoke to a UN peacekeeping source who says that Israel has violated that ceasefire about 100 times. But there are many people on both sides of this border who are desperately hoping that this doesn't escalate further and that the ceasefire prevails.
Like, it's just so cooked.
We've seen since the ceasefire went into effect, is it being successful? Broadly speaking.
Yeah, it's successful because Israel keeps bombing and then no one retaliates. But notice how the moment of retaliation from Hezbollah is immediately like, whoa, 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 you can't do that. Why is it always this way? Why is it stacked this way? Like, how come? How come we get this like fake ass ceasefire where only one side has to cease their fire and the other side can continue its invasion.
And that's the kind of attitude they're portraying. In Israel, they don't consider that the ceasefire has broken down, but they do consider this Hezbollah rocket incident as a grave violation. So the questions that are now being asked, especially by the detractors of Netanyahu, those in the opposition, those in the right wing.
Israel, by the way, since then killed 3 World Central Kitchen aid workers as well, and then claimed that one of them was Hamas when they knew that people were going to get mad at them, because the last time that they killed World Central Kitchen aid workers, they got, people got very mad at them. This time it didn't even make a blip, partially because none of them were white. They were Palestinians and brown people that they killed. They also killed the Gaza Soup Kitchen's head, the head of the Gaza Soup Kitchen. I mean, they're gross. I don't know what else to say. In the past 2 days, Israeli forces have killed 3 World Central Kitchen aid workers, killed a Save the Children staffer, killed a Gaza Soup Kitchen chef, killed an ICU director, attacked and killed hundreds of displaced Palestinians, shot a 10-year-old girl. That's from yesterday. Like, I genuinely don't understand. Yeah, there's also a photo of an Israeli soldier that's like masturbating. I don't even want to know if I want to show it. But yeah, there's a photo of an Israeli soldier that's like simulating a masturbation. Yeah, it's not, you can't see anything, but he's just like jerking off on a seat, looking at the destruction of Gaza. Also, things that we knew already that are now getting more broad media coverage, and I'm happy that there's finally like some media coverage over it. Remember how we talked about the quadcopters that snipe Palestinian doctors and children? There's also another use for quadcopters, as you guys know. We've briefly covered this before, but now there's more evidence for it. Quadcopters were emitting baby sounds, playing sounds of screaming women. Palestinians in Gaza say Israel's been using small quadcopter drones equipped with loudspeakers to lure them out of their homes and then shoot them.
جماعة الخير كوادكابتر قتلت صوت أطفال الآن من مخيم.
This is a Palestinian man saying a quadcopter is playing the sound of children
كوادكابتر قتلت صوت أطفال
right now in the Nusayrat camp.
مخيم إنصارات.
Yesterday, a young man was killed. He went to check out the noise, and he was shot.
In mid-April, we were informed that Israeli quadcopters were emitting bizarre sounds, including baby sounds or women screaming. I went personally to Nusayrat, and I interviewed several Palestinians separately, and the testimonies were almost identical. Quadcopters were for 2 consecutive nights on the 14th and the 15th, I guess, of April. They were emitting baby sounds, playing sounds of screaming women.
Didn't they do this shit in Deir Yassin? Yes, not this specifically, but I believe when they overtook Haifa, I think it was Haifa in 1948, they utilized psyops as well in a similar vein. But this time it was playing sounds from tanks, like British holdover tanks that they had, equipment left behind, that they had put speakers onto, where they would play the sounds of like machine gun fire and bombs exploding, because they didn't have machine guns and that many machine guns and that many bombs. So what they did was like play the sounds of like bombs exploding and machine guns and people dying so that people would leave. No, Haifa was not the Arab stronghold of Ben Gurion spared. You're thinking of Nazareth. Like Deir Yassin and a couple villages were ruthlessly slaughtered. I'm right. It was Haifa. Okay. So a couple of the villages were ruthlessly slaughtered. These villages had negotiations with neighboring Arab villages. The Jewish villages had a partnership with the Arab villages in the surrounding region. The Arab villages did not have any sort of like militia defense whatsoever, because they were like, oh yeah, we have negotiations with the Jewish villages around us. Like, we're fine. We trade with one another. We're neighbors. So in Deir Yassin, they did a lot of the atrocities that the village of Deir Yassin with Plan Dalet that Israelis and defenders of Israel actually claimed Hamas did on October 7, including throwing a child in a baker's oven in front of his dad, and then throwing the dad afterwards in that same oven. First, they tried to get the dad to throw the child in the oven, and when he refused to do so, they threw the dad in the oven afterwards. They made him watch, and then they threw him in the oven.
وبقولوا للفران ارمي ابنك بالفرن ارمي ابنك بالفرن اسمه حامد قال له أنا ما برمي ابني. قال له شوي. هم ضربوا الحاج حامد على راسه ومسكوا الولد رموه بالفرن. أنا شفت هالمنظر. شفت هالمنظر ما تمش فيها حيل من مرة. يعني بعدين مسكوا الأب حطوه وراه قالوا له الحق ابنك. أنا جيت عديت قلت هلا بيمسكوني قمت أركض.
You know, people being thrown in wells, just like endless depravity. So that was Deir Yassin. And the only reason why we know that that happened is because they left people alive. Now, the reason why they left people alive was so that those Arab villagers would then go to the village next to, you know, Deir Yassin or whatever, and repeat the atrocities that they had experienced, specifically so that it was easier to purge, the surrounding Arab villages without, you know, having to fight. They also paraded the people that they captured in Jerusalem in trucks and showed it to everybody, and people were like throwing stuff at them and whatnot, and then they executed them. This is in 1948. Part of the reason, so what they would do afterwards in like larger towns, for example, would be surround the town with Irgun and Haganah and these many Zionist brigades, militias, some of which were openly, you know, they called themselves terrorists. They would surround these Arab cities, these big cities like Haifa. So they went to Haifa, and everyone at this point is aware of the atrocities that the Zionist brigades are engaging in. So what they did basically was surround the town and leave one opening for every single person in the town to leave from. They would always surround the town and then leave one exit so that people could leave in an orderly manner, so that the Arabs that are fleeing these towns could leave in an orderly fashion. And what they would do in that process is they would play speakers from the sounds. They would obviously shoot people. They would obviously like explode bombs and stuff as well. Or even there was one documented instance, I believe, of like one plane dropping flyers, which is ironic because they still do that. But in order to not, you know, kill too many Palestinians, like waste too many bullets, they basically would do psyops. And the psyops were using using older British equipment that was left behind, equipped with speakers to play the sounds of bombs and play the sounds of machine gun fire and play the sounds of people dying in an effort to terrify and terrorize the Arab populations living in cities like Haifa, with the express purpose of ethnically cleansing and doing a population transfer and moving all the Palestinians, moving all the Arabs that lived there to a different area, only to never allow them to return to their ancestral homes ever again. That's it. They did that. They did psyops. Now the psyops have become even more cruel, where they broadcast intimidating sounds to lure, kill, and forcibly displace civilians in the Nusayrat camp, specifically babies crying, and you know, women crying, the sounds of women crying, so that if someone seeks out the children thinking that there is like a child in distress, they shoot and kill them. Gaza is a laboratory of violence. I remember listening to Mark Milley and the former Google guy who want to make inroads into the tech violence space. Basically, like a lot of these Palmer Luckey style guys are now actually making inroads with the Defense Department, and they want to change the way that America engages in procurement of new weapons. And I remember listening to them at the time talk in great detail about how Ukraine and how Gaza were basically experimental grounds for so much new technology, and they were worried that America was falling behind. That's another purpose for Israel, which is that Gaza is a laboratory for new ways to be cruel to civilians, new ways of subjugating large numbers of people, and new ways of testing out, new ways of doing research and development on a live population. And as we know, something that I've talked about quite frequently, Iraq used to be a testing ground for American weapons. If you recall, somewhere around like after 2003, the American government started testing what was known as an LRAD. An LRAD is a long-range acoustic device. These are very powerful speakers that are used to stop, any sort of like civilian uprising, right? Yeah, it's like a sound cannon. And when this experimentation was being conducted on the Iraqi population, Americans were oblivious to it. Now, most police departments all around the country have LRADs that they use on the American population. This is known as the Imperial Boomerang. The weapons that our government tests out on people that they have less care and consideration for, they inevitably use upon the domestic population. They test it in the field, and if they find it to be effective, then they move it to the home front. Yes, there is a great book called The Palestine Laboratory, How Israel Exports Technology and Occupation Around the World by Anthony Lowenstein. Another example of this, another immediate example of this is Israel itself. Israel not only in collaboration with American local police departments, trains in the post 9/11 universe, trains almost every local department on methods of apprehension and strategies that our domestic police utilizes. But also Israel itself used to use, and still does to this day, use skunk spray, a chemical weapon on the Palestinian homes in the West Bank. As an occupying force, the Israeli occupying force utilizes this horrible smelling chemical spray that they spray on Palestinian homes. No, it's not sewer water. No, that's a different thing that they do. Because Israeli settlements are always uphill from Palestinian encampments and Palestinian homes, they also dump their sewage directly on top of Palestinian villages. But that's besides the point. That's another thing. What I'm talking about is a specific chemical spray that they use that you cannot wash off. The only way that you can wash it off is if you buy the other antidote, I guess, from the same manufacturer. It's the skunk weapon. Here it is. Yeah. Skunk is a malodorant, non-lethal weapon used for crowd control by the Israeli Defense Forces and marketed to militaries and law enforcement around the world. It was manufactured by Odor Tech. The liquid's strong odor is marketed as an improvement over crowd control weapons such as rubber bullets and tear gas used by the IDF against Palestinian protesters, and they've deployed it against homes, Palestinian homes and whatnot. It's an organic, non-toxic blend of baking powder, yeast, and other ingredients. Now, the interesting thing that I was trying to explain to you is that the weapons have historically been used against the Palestinians. But in the 2018 protests that were launched against the Israeli government by Israeli citizens who were, some of them are pro-apartheid, some of them might not be, but it doesn't matter. Israeli citizens launched a protest against their own government for undermining the Supreme Court's authority and independent status. Those mass protests were squashed with these weapons. So the very same, or not 2018, sorry, 2022. So the very same weapons that were once used and still are used against the Palestinian population were then deployed against the Israeli population. What goes around comes around. This is the imperial boomerang. There will always be something that you disagree with your government on. And when you push and demand accountability and demand transparency and they don't offer it, inevitably you will protest. And if those protests become too disruptive, the government will use those weapons that you once knew as weapons that would defend your free speech or whatever against your enemies on you. In 2017, Israeli forces began using skunk against ultra-Orthodox Jewish protesters.
The quadcopters apparently played these sounds only to lure citizens out of their homes and to find someone to shoot. And this was confirmed by actually the reports that we followed up on at hospitals. There were cases of people getting injured by these quadcopters after going out to figure out what was the sound, to try to help.
فجأة سمعنا مرة بتزعق في نص الشارع. الحقوني النجدة ومعها عيل صغير يعني صوت عيل صغير بيطلب النجدة معها.
Help, with the baby asking for help. The voice was coming from outside the house door. There was a quadcopter with 4 propellers. Then it headed towards the tents, broadcasted the same crying. We called my cousin in the tents. He said, don't fall for it. It's just a sound system. Abu Anas al-Shurur. From this area, they shot him in the head. A recording that my brother took of the quadcopter broadcasting a voice of a child screaming for help or calling for his mother. I wonder if it's recordings of the detained children or paid actors. If it's the first, God forbid, that would be even more horrific. It's a child saying, I want my mother. They sourced it to a small Israeli drone with a loudspeaker over Khan Yunis. Another recording from the occupied West Bank shows an Israeli drone warning Palestinians they may be killed if they resist. Israeli arms manufacturer Elbit Systems produces a weapon system that can be fitted to various drones, which says it can operate day or night and provides highly accurate lethality. Yeah, they also have these drone copters that are retrofitted with snipers and AR-15s, and they are the ones who are sniping kids and shit. Israel did not provide answers to any of the questions. Like, all this stuff is readily available for those with, you know, with even a little bit of intellectual curiosity. And it's kind of crazy because, like, people still, in the face of all of these atrocities, weirdly maintain this, like, subtle position that they think is defensive, where they say, like, no, you don't understand. Like, if you criticize this shit, or if you don't criticize it within the boundaries that I think is appropriate, you're anti-Jewish. This has nothing to do with Judaism. And the only people that think this has anything to do with Judaism are fucking Nazis. So why the fuck are you turning around and aligning with Nazis on this in this regard? I've been tracking this stuff fairly closely for a very long time, as you guys know. And even I have been shocked time and time again about some of the new inventions that I have seen Israel utilize. Some of the new things that I have found out that Israel has done, like the cum squad, the goon platoon. If someone were to tell me before October 7 that, like, Israel has cum divers, people that go in and track fallen Israeli occupying force soldiers and retrieve their fucking semen in a timely manner so that they can impregnate their wives at home in an effort to continue the bloodline, I would be like, nobody cares about, you know, demographic concerns like this. This is like a made up thing. You're being anti-Semitic. Like, this seems like a little far-fetched, you know? I feel like you just made up some anti-Semitic conspiracy theory and you're just saying, like, oh, this is what the Israeli army is doing. And then you find out that it is a real thing that Israel is doing. It's just crazy. Also, the video of the dude being impaled with a smoke bomb. Yeah. Oh yeah, the smoke grenade or the smoke bomb that I saw. I don't know how the this, like, smoke was seen bursting from the head of a Palestinian victim of an Israeli attack in Beit Laiha in northern Gaza today. Witnesses likened it to the release of steam from a pressured engine. It is like they're dumping. I can't show you the video, obviously, but I believe it's experimental technology, or at least that's what doctors are saying. Like Dr. Munir al-Bursh, Director General of the Ministry of Health in Gaza, which gave reports to Al Jazeera. Israel's testing new weapons on us that we do not recognize. They drop bombs with terrifying sounds, and when a person gets within 200, 300 meters of them, they vaporize. The massacres happening in North Gaza are unknown to us until later. Nobody calls to inform us. The Israeli army bombs entire residential blocks, wiping out all their inhabitants, and we only find out about them a day or two later. And one of the videos that has come out of that, it basically looks like a smoke grenade that decapitated a Palestinian Palestinian person. They try to dump buckets of dirt on it, and it literally doesn't stop. It gets like crazier and crazier. It's just like the smoke gets wilder and wilder. And I have no idea what the fuck it is. I've never seen anything like it. International and local doctors operating in North Gaza hospitals have found cube-like structures which are made of tungsten and built into weapons designed to explode and cause maximum damage to the victims. I'm not like a weapons expert. I have no idea what any of this shit is. I just resort to people on the ground that say this is new. And of course, during the horrors that they are experiencing, they do have the capacity to get things wrong. And we might not know until later down the line, but here's Element Technologies expanding into tungsten fragmentation production capabilities all the way back in 2022. For those of you who don't know, tungsten is incredibly dense. Dr. Mohammed Al-Mughair, the head of the Department of Supplies of the Gaza Civil Defense, said Israel is using weapons that vaporize bodies and erase any trace of their existence. To understand these weapons used by the Israeli occupation, when they shell a house, there are instances of one bodies between 2 to 5 bodies. Those are bodies we can't reach. Those bodies vaporize and are directly consumed by the airstrike or explosion. The thermobaric weapon, I don't know if this is the right one.
It forms an aerosol known as vacuum bombs. They work in 2 steps. A charge contained in a warhead explodes. Made of gas, liquid, or finely pulverized explosives, it forms an aerosol cloud. A second explosive charge ignites that cloud, which creates a fireball reaching a temperature of 3,000 degrees. The impact also creates a huge shockwave. Oxygen in the surrounding air is sucked in, generating a vacuum and a huge overpressure 1.5 to 2 times.
Yeah, this is this. Israel uses missiles in Gaza designed to explode and spread metal cubes that pierce blood vessels and nerves, causing death or paralysis. It's not impossible for this to be a part of shrapnel. This is designed like this, so it can cut through and destroy. Doctors operating in Gaza said they found this metal cube inside of a Palestinian patient. Dr. Mohammed Tahir is a UK doctor volunteering to save Palestinians in Gaza.
The last case we just did was a young man who was the subject of an explosive injury. He had penetrating trauma to his chest and he had a paralyzed right arm. I suspected that he had a brachial plexus injury. But actually I was quite shocked when I found that a single cube-like structure had...
No, thermobarics rip bodies out of the house. They're designed to suck the air out of buildings. These are tungsten shrapnel shells, basically a super expensive next-gen pineapple grenade.
Penetrated the skin, cut through what we call the upper trunk, and then also the lower trunk, and then lodged itself in the skin of his back. And this has left him with paralysis in his right arm, which probably will be permanent because of the nature of the condition, despite our best efforts. So these cubes that I used are perfectly formed cubes. They're made of tungsten, and they are built into weapons that actually are designed to explode and cause maximum damage indiscriminately. And so something so very small can in fact kill you, because in his case it was millimeters from his main artery. And if he was in Jabalia, if he was in the street in the middle of the night, if he was at home and no access to an ambulance, he would have died. And we know that this is the case for many people, and many reports of the use of these weapons and that they are still used today is a war crime in my opinion.
The cubes are just millimeters in size, but can spread out over 20 meters, shredding metal and human flesh. This is what I mean when I say it's a laboratory for like all of the newest weapons technology. Like Unit 731 shit against the captive audience. You know how like Unit 731 was testing, you know, the limits of frostbite or what happens when you sew two twins together or some shit. Once you make this technology, you gotta fucking live test it. Yeah, they leave minimal entry wounds, but they cause massive organ damage. Doctors say fragmentation weapons pierce blood vessels, nerves, and are a major cause of amputations. Which amputations that have to be done without anesthetics, by the way, because Israel refuses to let in anesthetics, crutches, dates inside Israel's ghost list of items arbitrarily denied entry into Gaza. Israel bans the importation into Gaza of anesthetics. Hence, the scores of children who are amputated daily following Israel's bombings are put to the knife without anesthesia, if they are lucky to be taken to a functioning medical facility and not be bombed when in it. How do I not go crazy from seeing this stuff every day? The UN says Israel's war in Gaza has left over 2,500 Palestinians with life-changing injuries. I don't go crazy looking at this stuff every day because in my heart I know that while there is a fresh hell every new day that Israel unleashes upon the population of Palestinians that it is a belligerent occupier of, I know that every day we get closer to some semblance of justice, especially in comparison to where we were before. And speaking of which, I mean, there are more and more people that come out and openly say what Israel is doing is a genocide, is ethnic cleansing. One of those people is a former Israeli defense minister. Former Israeli defense minister says his country is ethnic cleansing in Gaza.
You know, the former Israeli defense minister says that Israel is carrying ethnic cleansing in northern Gaza. Moshe Ayalon, a very, stalwart Likudnik, and so on. So why is that offensive?
Moshe Ya'alon is he's the former chief of staff of the IDF. He served as Israel's defense minister and under Benjamin Netanyahu. Like he was Benjamin Netanyahu's defense minister, chat. Here's the video. Here he says Israel is carrying out ethnic cleansing in North Gaza. There is no Beit Laiha, no Beit Hanun. There are currently operating in Jabalia and clearing the area of Arabs. Going the way that we are currently being dragged into, to occupy, to annex. to ethnically cleanse. Look at the north of the Gaza Strip. Call it what you want, a displacement of residents. To establish Jewish settlements. Ethnic cleansing in the Gaza Strip, asks the person that he's talking to. Is that where you think we're heading? Why heading there, he says. He replies with, why heading there? What's going on there now? What's going on there now? There is no Beit Laiha. There is no Beit Hanun. And now we're working on Jabaliyah. What's happening practically is a cleansing of the land of Arabs. He's saying we're not heading there. We are there. Is he saying this is a positive? No, dude. No. There is an appetite for death and destruction that I think even former defense ministers are like, is too much. What you guys don't understand is like, this guy isn't a woke warrior, okay? He was Benjamin Netanyahu's defense minister, chat. This is the, Nikki Haley of Israel. Worse than Nikki Haley. There are people who are like, dude, what the okay, maybe we've gone a little too far. He wasn't just any defense minister. He was Benjamin Netanyahu's defense minister. He's a Likudnik. He is a part of his party. Here, or we will follow the path of this government. To be a messianic dictatorship, racist, fascist, homophobic, misogynistic, backwards, corrupt, and most importantly, a pariah. This is one choice. This is not a 27K chat, Muddy. Yeah, it's because I'm botting it, dude. Chatters, type 1 if you're just listening. Type 1 now if you're just listening and you haven't chatted yet. It bricked the system. Is that good? Sometimes adults just take it all in. Not everything deserves a reaction, chatter. Not everything deserves a reaction. Chuck Dies, thank you for the 25. Get the subs. Anyway, so where was I? As I was saying, this is not like a woke person, but this is a person who recognizes that Israel being governed by a coalition of rabid, misogynistic, homophobic fascists like the Itamar Ben-Gvirs and the Bezalel Smotriches of the world, which is precisely the path it's heading down, is going to cause it to become a pariah. Part of that is also because Israel's current actions with that governing coalition, at the behest of that governing coalition, partnered with like Benjamin Netanyahu's personal interest in continuing to Israel's ethnic cleansing is causing the world to reinterpret and reanalyze its relationship with Israel and even Israelis. It's one junction. The second option has to do with the relations with the Palestinians, who is in favor of separation, and it has nothing to do with right or left. In favor of separation and not in favor of a binational and an apartheid state, or to follow the path that we are currently dragged. To occupy, to annex, to cleanse, ethnic cleansing. Look at the northern Gaza Strip and settle a Jewish settlement. That's the point. There is no Beit Laiha, no Beit Hanun. They are currently operating in Jabaliyah. In fact, they are clearing the area from Arabs. What is the concept? I want people to understand. What is the concept of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir that the state of Israel is currently implementing? Not that Netanyahu believed in. We will leave it at the moment. I was with him until 2016. This is a different Netanyahu. For his own personal survival, he gives them the stage. Who are Smotrich and Ben-Gvir? Their rabbi is Rabbi Dov Lior. Rabbi Dov Lior was the rabbi of the Jewish underground that intended, in addition to blowing up buses and mayors and so on, to blow up the Dome of the Rock, to provoke a war of Gog and Magog. If we blow up the Dome of the Rock, the Muslims will attack us. So this is our opportunity to conquer the entire Promised Land, from the Euphrates to the Nile, to cleanse it from non-Jews. To cleanse it from non-Jews is the concept. Well, the story of the Dome of the Rock failed because of Shin Bet. So someone tried to stir it up in the cave of the patriarchs. Baruch Goldstein, may his name perish, another student of Rabbi Dov Lior. He's singling out Kahanis and saying that the messianic, the messianic cultish Jews that are that comprise a big chunk of the settler movement in this country are moving the entire nation in the direction of ethnic cleansing of all non-Jews from the region, from the Nile to the Euphrates, in this foolhardy and very bloody affair to trigger what Christians consider to be the rapture, whose picture was displayed in Ben Gvir's living room. He's talking about Baruch Goldstein, the massacre of the Cave of Patriarchs. Ben Gvir proposes marriage to his wife at the grave of Baruch Goldstein and circumcision. Do you understand who this is about? So these are the people who right now, like a tail wagging the dog of the state of Israel, are ruling the state of Israel in the finance ministry, the ministry in charge of the police. And Smotrich also deals with the issues of citizens in Judea and Samaria. Are we surprised that we are? Judea and Samaria is the occupied West Bank, by the way. Are we surprised that we are in The Hague? Excuse me? Here I can justify Smotrich's statement to wipe out Hawara. And then there is a Jewish pogrom. 40 houses are burned. 8 houses are burned in Madama or Akraba. It is the us, the ones who said never again. I say it is the son of a Holocaust survivor. Or when he says, I don't have a moral problem starving Palestinians to death. 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. Is that my people? Can I support such a government? Then they will be in The Hague, rightly so. Why The Hague? We need to judge them and kick them out of the public sector. Former defense minister of Israel under Benjamin Netanyahu. Former Israeli defense minister under Benjamin motherfucker Netanyahu. How old is the video? This is a day old. He is from Benjamin Netanyahu's party. Is this all indicative of a sentiment in Israel? There is no widespread momentum for this kind of sentiment in Israel. There is not. There are a shit ton of people who have directly held the gun over the Palestinians' heads that have come out with statements like this. Former heads of Shin Bet, other prominent figures in Israeli government. Many of them, even if they have this opinion, cannot change the broader perspective of Israeli society. In some ways, is similar to like never Trump Republicans. You know what I mean? Former Bush era people being like, yo, chill. This Trump guy is like John Bolton, you know, crying about some person in office now. It's a little bit different though, because it's not like Dick Cheney is saying like the Iraq war was a violent endeavor and we have to stop it. So I guess it's a little bit different. I think many former Israeli officials look at the situation in an honest and pragmatic lens and recognize that Israel's actions are deeply frustrating to the rest of the world, and they see it for what it is. Here's what normal Israeli society is doing. Israelis bring school field trips to Sderot to watch the genocide live. In front of the binoculars, there's a trash can, so the small children can stand on it and take a closer look.
Behind me in the distance is Gaza. This is an Israeli lookout platform.
This kid's awesome, by the way. He's so brave. Holy shit. This dude is amazing. He'll just like go and duke it out with the fucking Rastafarian settlers when they're trying to pull water pipes from the ground so that Palestinian villages can't get running water. And he'll just go there and he'll sit on top of the pipes and be like, no, that's a motherfucker who's literally putting his life on the line. Okay. He probably got spitted on numerous times.
The distance is Gaza. This is an Israeli lookout platform that was set up so that Israelis can come here and watch the genocide that their state is unfolding. They bring school field trips here. There are binoculars that you can use for 5 shekels. This is a popular tourist destination. People come here.
I like that they've streamlined Sderot cinema, where this was a famous, very violent thing that Israeli society had done back in the day, where they called it Sderot Night Cinema, where they would just like sit on top of hilltops, put couches up there, and watch Gaza get bombed into oblivion. Now they got binoculars. That's sick.
From all over the country. From here, every falling rocket is just a quiet thud and a plume of smoke. And from there, it's a bunch of dead children.
Is Andre X, yeah. I think he came from Russia when that war started, so he's been super active as soon as he was smacked in the face of the reality of Israeli society. He's done a few good interviews. Yeah. This has been going on for some time, yeah. You can cry all day, every day, and say it's anti-Semitic to call out these things, but it ain't gonna fucking change right from wrong, brother. all you're doing is masking your own personal conscience, where you know deep down inside that this shit is fucked up and unsustainable. And instead of, recognizing the realities that are unfolding and letting go of your previous associations, letting go of your prior allegiances due to maybe decades of social conditioning, which is tough. It is tough. I know that. Instead of doing that, you just like lean in to this cognitive dissonance and find yourselves in the throes of the comfort of reactionary sentiment. No, it's my enemies that are fucking deeply evil and wrong. No. All these people that look at the fucking death and destruction and say that it is untenable, it is unconscionable, it cannot go on. All those people, they must have some cynical reason for doing this. Why are they singling out Israel? But it's not like I single out Israel. I call out my own state. I call out America. I call out my other state, Turkey, Still real quiet about Qatar though. I mean, I've shit on Qatar and his slavery practices before, especially during the World Cup. So have you talked about the Turkish-backed Al-Qaeda invasion of Syria? Yes, I have.
Up to you. Why can't you say what Israel is doing is basically ethnic cleansing?
So we have engaged with the government of Israel about its actions in northern Gaza. I think those statements refer broadly to the so-called general's plan. I can tell you two things. Number one, they have said to us that's not their policy. And number two, we have made clear to them that that we would fundamentally reject any such policy. I can't speak to the assessments made by a former Israeli military official. I can tell you that when it comes to potential violations of international humanitarian law, something else he raised in his statement, we have our ongoing assessments, and they have not concluded.
But, most observers see what's going on, and they term it as such. I know you...
Oh, damn, bro. They said so. Never mind. My bad. Shit. Yo, if they said so, if the genocide dares says so, then my bad, I guess.
You disapprove the word genocide and so on, but, a lot of people think what's going on is genocide, especially that the threshold has crossed 45,000 people. So I'm saying that at one point, the U.S. has to recognize what's going on for what it is, right? For what it is. Say, when you move about 2 million people, that is some sort of ethnic cleansing. Do you disagree?
So we have been very clear what we want to see happen in Gaza, and that's everyone who has been forced from their homes, we want to see have the opportunity to go back to their neighborhoods and have the ability to rebuild and have support from the international community to rebuild. And we continue to engage, not just with the government of Israel, but with other countries in the region to work to get both a ceasefire and the release of hostages and a plan for the day after that would ultimately allow those Palestinians who have been displaced to do that.
But there seems to be no plan for the day after as far as Israel is concerned. We have not seen it. We have not seen it in statement or in deeds and so on. In fact, yesterday, or the day before, I don't remember, they killed three other workers from the World Central Kitchen, so that Israel shows its intent to deprive Gaza of any kind of aid that goes, under the pretext that they are attacking a militant. I mean, they've killed the people that committed October 7th, there were maybe 1,400. They have killed already 45,000 people. And they keep doing this under the guise or the pretext or the claim that there was a militant among those people.
So with respect to that strike, I can't speak to it. I know that they have made the public claim that one of the people killed in that strike was affiliated with the attacks on October 7th, or had been involved in the attacks of October 7th. If that's true, it would, of course, be extremely troubling. But that said, there were other civilians who died in that strikes, which is why we continue to push for a ceasefire. I can tell you that the Secretary is meeting with Israel's Minister for Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, later today here at the State Department, where he is going to continue to express the position of the United States that we need to get a ceasefire, we need to see the hostages released, we need to implement plans for the day after that would allow or would establish governance, security, and reconstruction inside Gaza, and that ought to be an urgent priority, not just for the United States, not just for other countries in the region, but for Israel as well.
Would you demand to look at the evidence that Israel claims to have used in killing the kitchen, central kitchen, the World Central Kitchen? It's a Washington-based organization.
Look, we think that barring any unique intelligence sensitivities, that's evidence that they ought to make public for the world to see.
Yeah. Also, while we're having this conversation, the same settler operations. Yeah, this is what I was going to talk about. So Drop Site News came out with this report. Scoop from Yunus Tarawi. I'm glad that his account has been restored by Twitter after he got like fucking weirdly banned. An extremist settler org specialized in building illegal West Bank outposts is now operating in North Gaza, paying civilians $165 daily to join. Libby Group claims to be demolishing homes in Beit Laiha through their website, though their website don't show that they provide such services. Looking for bulldozer operators for demolition work in Gaza. The job is also relevant for those who have not served in the army. Good pay. That was the ad. Libby Group Construction and Infrastructure Limited. They work in settlements at the forefront of construction and development for Jewish settlements in the West Bank. We take the raw, undeveloped land and transform it into a fully developed neighborhood connected to the infrastructure and flourishing. It's all on us. All that is left to populate the homes. The company is owned by two brothers, Harel and Eliav Libby. Harel Libby's farm, ethnically cleansed Palestinian community Ain Zara in the Jordan Valley in West Bank. In 2012, the Israeli military issued a removal order from the West Bank against Harel Libby. Harel has long had a record of attacking Palestinians in the West Bank and establishing outposts deep in the Palestinian villages, documented by Palestinians and Israeli monitoring NGOs. Residents on the ground say that the U.S.-sanctioned settler Moshe Sharvit works very close with Harel Libby in attacking Palestinian locals. This is where our investigation starts. Are you able to think about moving into a new spot? Harel Libby is asked in 2022. If only. It's a privilege, he says. Do you have an idea? I'm not going to tell you all the secrets. Beit Laiha, 30th of November, 2024. This is the Libby Construction Company. Working. They are building permanent settlements in North Gaza. A work opportunity for demolitions in Gaza. The job is also relevant for those who have not served in the army. Good pay. A Facebook ad on a reservist group announced. Yeah, this is the part. West Bank soon. It already happens in West Bank. They've done this in the West Bank. The way the modus operandi is simple. You send rabid settlers in the Palestinian villages. They fucking spray tag houses with the Star of David. That is a sign that they're gonna firebomb your house. They come in and they firebomb your house. They move the families out of the ancestral farms that they used to live on Palestinian territory. If the families fight back, the IDF comes in and kills the family. If the family fights back in the West Bank, I'm explaining what they do in the West Bank. If the family fights back, the IDF comes in and arrests members of the family or directly kills them. They burn down the olive trees. They kill the animals. It is illegal for them to fight back. Then they come back in, they demolish the homes, and they build settlements on top of the homes. The settlements are like little castles. Now, originally, because of its illegality, these operations were still funded by the Israeli government, but quietly funded by the Israeli government. And there were periods of time when they said, oh, we're not going to do it. Or oopsie, they did it. But once the settlement is established and there are people living inside of the settlement, then it's over. It doesn't matter. There's people living inside the settlement. Now they are, full-fledged Israeli citizens living inside that settlement. The IOF has to defend them. Troops smuggled a settler leader into this crazy lady, the Nahala Settlement Movement Organization, Daniela Weiss, who is a famous psycho. Troops smuggled her in to Gaza to survey the settlement options. IDF probing reported illegal entry of the strip of Daniela Weiss in the same week as civilian researcher Zeev Ehrlich was killed by Hezbollah after entering Lebanon war zone against protocol. So that's how they do it in the West Bank. They build the settlements, and then they build roads to the settlements, and the settlements are deliberately crafted in a way to partition the entirety of the Palestinian land so that all of these Palestinian villages are separated from one another. Then they put up barriers, protective security barriers around the roads, around the settlements themselves. And then they tell the Palestinians they can't even use those roads. They build separate roads for the Palestinians. They have two different license plates for Palestinians in the West Bank in their own soil. They refuse the Palestinians their legal rights to get water. They refuse the Palestinians any sort of building contracts and building licenses to build water wells. They destroy water wells that the Palestinian homes build. They destroy them deliberately. Access to food and water is very limited. Access to free travel is very limited for the Palestinians in the West Bank, which is occupied Palestinian territory. This is something that has been ongoing for years, especially escalated in the last 40 years, especially gotten worse and accelerated during the so-called peace process. That is what the lie of the two-state created for the Palestinians. That right there. This is why I laugh whenever people try to do like debate points and say, oh, you don't understand. The Palestinians were no partner in peace. Get the fuck out of here. How do you negotiate with someone when they have a knife to your neck? How do you negotiate with them as honest, even partners in negotiation when they're holding you down, when they're shackling you and put a knife to your throat? You can't. That's what Hasan Ganafini said. Famously, negotiating with Israel is like the negotiation between the knife and a neck. You can't. That's not a real negotiation. And in that process of the so-called peace process, the settlement expansions happened, and they created these Bantustans in the West Bank, and you can see it on the map. Pull up any map of the settlement operations in the West Bank, and you will see over time, slowly but surely, they start growing and partitioning Palestinian territory. First, they say we have security concerns. There's always a security concern. That's always the modus operandi of the Israeli government. Sorry, we have a security concern. We have to maintain this land. We have to use it for military use. Then the settlers come in and they build a settlement, and then they have to defend the settlers because those are Israeli citizens. And that's how Israel has developed this apartheid and have made it worse and worse year over year. They tried that shit in southern Lebanon too. Jerusalem Post articles came out immediately after Israel decided to swing its crosshairs onto southern Lebanese territory, saying, well, Jews do have an ancestral claim to southern Lebanon too. There's always an article. What happens is, you have security concerns, so you wipe out villages in the 1 mile boundary, 1 kilometer boundary, just like they did in the Gaza Strip near the Gaza partition wall. They did that. They try to do that in southern Lebanon too. Oops, we got to wipe these villages out. Oops, some settlers ran into southern Lebanon and started building homes. Oops, we got to defend these guys. There are very real violent Hezbollah militants in the region. It's like, bitch, it's their neighborhood. Fuck you mean? Why are you building a home on top of their village? Yeah, of course. Of course they're going to fight back. And it always masquerades under the guise of Israel's right to defend itself. Of course, Israel is not going to say, we're doing ethnic cleansing. We love doing genocide. They're not going to say that. Just like it's ridiculous for Russia to claim that it has to enforce territorial control over parts of Ukraine. Sorry, we have a right to defend ourselves. Nobody believes when Russia says they have a right to defend themselves. Russia has a closer historical argument to make to dominating Ukraine than Israel does over Palestine. And we understandably look at that and we go, get the fuck out of here. That's ridiculous. No, of course you don't have a right to fucking permanently annex Ukrainian territory. It's ridiculous. But for some weird reason, there's this double standard in the international community. And it's not necessarily a double standard enforced through the international community. It's more so a double standard that our governments claim exists. Can you explain how Russia has a greater claim to Ukraine than Israel does to Palestine? No, I'm not saying that Russia has a greater claim to Ukraine. I'm saying that Russia can point to the USSR and be like, this was our territory not that long ago, as opposed to Israel has never had any sort of territorial claim. It's like 3,000 years ago. Get the fuck out of here. That's ridiculous. This does not make the Russian argument correct. This does not make the Russian argument better. I'm saying that we have the capacity to understand that while neither country has a claim over another's territory, okay, we only recognize that when Russia says it, but the very same people don't recognize it when Israel says it. That's my point. It's the same dumbass argument. And I'm sure there are plenty of dumbasses in this chat. Not that guy. Maybe he misunderstood. But there's plenty of dumbasses in this chat that wait for me to say some shit like that so they can clip it and then turn around and say, excuse me, he thinks that what Russia is doing is wonderful and awesome. It's ridiculous. But yeah, guess what, dude? Israel said that they're not doing anything wrong. So I guess we should shut the fuck up about it. If I have the might, why should I consider those who don't in their opinions? What benefits, let's say, America to allow Palestine to exist? I had no response to this. So your friend was making a might is right argument. Your classmate was saying like might is right. That's insane. How would they feel if the century of Chinese dominance unfolds and China treats the rest of the world like America has treated every other fucking global South nation? I'm certain that they would be singing a very different tune. This is at the heart of Western chauvinism, where people feel as though American dominance is endless and that our enemies, or people who we have declared our enemies, will never be able to do the things that we do to them. People always assume that the principle of humanitarian aid is for the weak, and that ultimately Western domination is the permanent state of the planet. History doesn't work that way. Things change. You're just comfortable in that position because right now you sit in it and you just assume that things might never change. But even in a private affair, even in a interpersonal relationship that you might have, might is right is only an argument that works as long as you feel mighty, as long as you think you have that might. If someone were to come up to you, a force that is domineering, a force that is powerful, more powerful than you, and came up to you and beat you and your family and stole your home, and you had no legal recourse whatsoever, I think you would understand that might is right is no longer an appropriate vector, an appropriate venue, an appropriate attitude to have. I genuinely don't get it. And I think it's a genuinely weak person's position to have. The reality of the matter is we cannot foresee an end to capitalism, and imperialism is the final state of capitalism. So American imperialism is seen as a naturally occurring order of business in the same way that capitalism is seen as a naturally occurring business.